where the odds that Donald Trump will finish his term as president have dipped in light of a Republican revolt over the president's BFF, Jeffrey Epstein. Did you hear about this? The House could vote as soon as tomorrow on whether to release the Epstein files.
In Washington, the government shutdown ended after 8 Senate Democrats caved, so Wednesday really should have been a good day for the president until this happened.
President Trump refusing to answer why he won't let the FBI release the Jeffrey Epstein files, even as just revealed messages written by the ex-offender raise new questions about their friendship and whether Trump...
Jimmy Kimmel and John Oliver just joined forces, and the roast they unleashed on Donald Trump was so intense even his spray tan looked ready to evacuate. This wasn't comedy yet, was a full-scale comedic airstrike. Their jokes hit harder than Trump's all caps tweets. The ego damage was visible from space, and the meltdown that followed could qualify as its own weather event. So what pushed them to go this hard? Buckle up, this is comedy warfare at its peak.
You know, throwing a party at your private golf club where the theme is rich white people, hours before millions of Americans are set to lose their food assistance, might be the Trumpiest Trump move of all time. It felt like the last big bash before the Epstein files come out.
And it's understandable why Trump's struggling to get even his own base to take his word for it that there is nothing to see here, because to do so, you essentially have to believe everything we've learned about Trump over the years is...
Kimmel ignited the night like a firework. Factory overdosed on caffeine, no warm-up, no easing in. He came out swinging with sarcasm, sharp enough to etch marble. The second he said Trump's name, the room shifted. The audience leaned in, sensing something chaotic, electric, and undeniably explosive was about to happen.
Is likely to pass bigly. At least 50 Republicans are expected to break ranks, which has forced Trump to now claim he's for the files being released. After almost a year of saying he didn't want to release, after a year of stalling, hedging, browbeating members of his own party last night, all of a sudden Trump reversed course completely. He wrote, as I said on Friday night to the fake news media, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we...
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Then Oliver stepped in, and it didn't feel like a joke, it felt like a dissertation wrapped in destruction. Where Kimmel went explosive, Oliver went surgical. He dissected Trump's persona like a scientist studying bacteria, only to calmly report that the bacteria were organizing a parade. His comedy wasn't loud, it was corrosive. He unraveled Trump's contradictions as though narrating a tragic spectacle staged inside a carnival.
All Trump did was repeatedly host Epstein at Mar-a-Lago, have him at his wedding, hang out with him at Victoria's Secret fashion shows, get listed as a passenger on his plane 8 times, joke with him at a party while pointing out hot women and saying something into his ear that got the most grotesque smile in the history of human expressions. Tell a reporter, I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, and allegedly hosts a calendar girl competition where, other than the 24 or so women flown in to provide the entertainment, the only guests...
Every observation landed with deliberate theatrical precision, the kind that makes laughter feel almost illegal. The drama wasn't subtle, it was nuclear. In Kimmel's comedic universe, Trump wasn't an unstoppable force, but a fragile skyscraper held together by spray tan and bravado. Each punchline made the structure quake.
Man, if you have nothing to hide, why even have the vote? Why not just have the Department of Justice release the files now? After 10 months of fighting tooth and nail, doing everything he could to keep those files secret, he's now asking for a full release, which is what got all these guys in trouble in the first place. So his new plan, his plan now is hurry up and release the files so I...
Each remark peeled back. Another layer of Trump's inflated self-mythology until the room could almost see insecurity leaking through the cracks. The drama was sharply elegant. Oliver delivered his mockery with the precision of someone who has studied their subject long enough to chart every weakness. Trump wasn't a roaring lion anymore. He was a man tangled in his own microphone cables, insisting the cables were jealous of him. Even as they tightened around his performance,
Trump's name coming up again and again. In a 2017 email to former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, Epstein writing, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body. So yes, dangerous.
Wow, that doesn't look great. When even the guy running the Pervert Express to Crime Island thinks that...
Kimmel grabbed the baton without missing a beat. turning Trump's trademark self-celebration into a full comedic buffet. It wasn't about one moment hit. It was about a lifelong pattern of claiming every achievement ever imagined, no matter what evidence, logic, or reality had to say about it. Kimmel painted Trump as a personality powered entirely by ego. The way turbines run on wind endlessly, noisily, and with zero regard for efficiency. Every exaggerated victory pose became a punchline. Every grandiose self-comparison became a satirical mural. Trump wasn't just roasted, he was reshaped into a cautionary tale about unchecked self-worship. Kimmel reimagined Trump's political bravado as a chaotic theme. Park Ride operated by someone who never read the manual but loudly insists he wrote it. And once Oliver stepped back in, the analysis turned even sharper. He spotlighted every meltdown, every contradiction, every moment. Trump declared the world unfair simply because reality refused to bow. This wasn't rage disguised as comedy. It was comedy infused with weary resignation. Oliver made Trump's saga feel like an endlessly running sitcom, plagued by too many plot twists from a writer unwilling to accept cancellation. The audience's laughter tangled with disbelief. Not because the jokes were outrageous, but because the truth behind them was impossible to ignore.
We weighed in on the SNAP funding fiasco on his Twitter platform, Truth Social. He wrote, "I do not want Americans to go hungry just because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government." That's true. He doesn't want them to go hungry. He just wants them to lose their health insurance. He wants them to eat, but health insurance, no. And today we learned that the Trump administration is only going to fund about half the monthly food benefits families on SNAP get. He wanted to cut all their benefits, but a judge ruled that they have to pay at least half.
Kimmel returned with full theatrical force, and this round genuinely stung. He took on Trump's legacy of public tantrums like a narrator, documenting the emotional life cycle of a man who still hasn't accepted that consequences also apply to him. Every dramatic rant became a reenactment of someone losing a board game, flipping the table, and insisting it was part of the strategy. Kimmel amplified every posture, every puffed-up stance, every forced victory pose unraveling in real time. His mockery hit hard not because it accused, but because it revealed. Trump didn't appear as a leader in control. He looked like a man sprinting behind his own reputation while loudly insisting he was leading it. The tension in the room peaked. Trump's once booming, bombastic public image suddenly looked paper-thin under Kimmel's spotlight. Then Oliver stepped in to dismantle Trump's business bravado. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was a cold, comedic autopsy. He framed Trump's empire as a cinematic universe where every sequel performed worse, yet somehow received even more marketing. A franchise fueled by ego rather than success.
He tried a last-minute arm twist to get Republicans like Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace to back off this Epstein stuff. Lauren Boebert was even summoned to the Situation Room to be worked over by Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. They tried to persuade her to remove her signature from the petition demanding the files be made public, which is exactly what someone who's totally innocent and has nothing to hide would do.
Oliver's tone was pure precision. He treated Trump's business resume like a museum exhibit of disasters. Each failure carefully labeled as genius by a curator determined to rewrite history. Bankruptcies, lawsuits, abandoned ventures, every debacle Trump had ever repackaged as a triumph was exposed as delusion coated in gold paint. The audience wasn't laughing because the jokes were huge. They laughed because the exaggerations were barely exaggerations at all. Oliver painted a world where Trump could trip over financial rubble, while proudly declaring himself the unquestioned king of the economy. The visual was so absurdly accurate the room could barely hold its composure. Kimmel jumped in next and targeted Trump's speaking style, not the words, but the spectacle. He transformed Trump's sweeping hand gestures into an interpretive dance of self-worship, each movement an ode to his own imagined brilliance. Every dramatic pause became a moment where Trump waited for applause that existed only in his head. Kimmel reenacted the posture of a man who equates confidence with intelligence, gazing at a crowd like a monarch awaiting emotional tribute. The comedy wasn't cruel, it was grand theatrical satire. He painted Trump as someone narrating his own greatness to an audience that wasn't even there, complete with triumphant smirks and victory poses following statements no one would describe as profound. It was a parody of self-adoration that felt uncomfortably, hilariously real.
I know that Trump seems to be immune to shame, but come on, at some point, he's going to look at himself in the mirror and even if briefly think, none as bad as me. Captain Freak of the floating sex dungeon thinks I am the worst? Fuck, that is rough. The White House has been in damage control mode ever since, even insisting that the emails prove Trump did.
Kimmel came back for the core of it. All the ego, the crown jewel of the roast. He mocked Trump's obsession with image as if it were a basic survival instinct. The hair became its own character. The spray tan became armor. The facial expressions became full legal arguments. Every element of Trump's appearance was treated like a product he was desperately trying to market to himself. Kimmel portrayed a man who could lose everything yet still pause to admire his reflection. The exaggeration was so uncannily familiar that the audience didn't even need setup. Lines the absurdity carried itself. Trump wasn't just mocked. His vanity was elevated to a mythological creature desperately in need of taming. Oliver countered by dissecting Trump's relationship with factual reality, or the total absence of one. He didn't shout. He narrated it like a wildlife documentary about a creature that refuses to acknowledge evidence unless it personally flatters him. Oliver described Trump's reactions to criticism as a cinematic montage of denial, fury, and wild reinterpretation. If a headline wasn't glowing, it was wrong. If a fact contradicted him, the fact was defective. Trump didn't inhabit reality. He inhabited a snow globe with his own face printed on the inside. Oliver's satire made the audience feel as though they were peering into an alternate dimension where accountability evaporates and self-importance warps the laws of logic.
Trump won't even meet to figure out how to get things back on track.
Are you going to meet with Democratic leadership?
I'm always going to meet. All they have to do is open up the country. Let them open up the country, and we'll meet. We'll meet very quickly. But they have to open up the country. It's their fault. Everything is their fault.
That's right. The buck stops over there.
Oliver followed by targeting Trump's never-ending hunger for praise, portraying him as a man who survives entirely on applausivon if he has to provide it himself. He crafted a world where Trump collects compliments like dragons hoard gold, stockpiling them with frantic intensity in case someone else dares to shine brighter. Every trophy photo, every inflated crowd-sized claim, every self-awarded title became evidence that Trump isn't searching for affection, he's demanding tribute. Oliver's satire turned pride into currency and Trump into a man constantly trying to purchase more of it. Kimmel stepped back and shifting the focus to Trump's obsession with appearing unbreakable. He painted a vivid image of someone insisting he's winning even while visibly sinking. The more Trump stumbled, the louder he proclaimed victory. Kimmel didn't depict him as a titan of history, but as a cautionary meme guaranteed to outlast him, not a leader carved in stone, but a walking headline future generations will study to understand. How confidence can overshadow competence. Oliver closed by turning every scandal, outburst, lie, boast, rant, and contradiction into a single mosaic of chaos. The roast wasn't fueled by anger. It felt conclusive. The comedy became a mirror, and in that mirror stood a man shaped not by greatness, but by the absolute refusal to accept anything less.
Reason to be dragged into a meeting than to get a lecture on appearance from someone who looks like Mattel's first Kilda pledge during Rush, Kendall. And that wasn't all, because Hegseth was then followed by the Commander-in-Chief, who gave his own meandering address, including this sleepy digression about boats.
You know, in the Second World War, they were freighters and different types, but we were doing a ship a day. And now we don't do ships. And I'm not a fan of some of the ships you do. I'm a very aesthetic person. I don't like some of the ships you're doing aesthetically. They say, oh, it's stealth. I say, that's not stealth. An ugly ship is not necessary in order to say you're stealth.
You know, he is...
Kimmel returned like a man determined to maximize the roast's atmospheric damage. He zeroed in on Trump's obsession with rewriting history in real time, as if every setback could be erased with enough confidence and a few Sharpie markers. Kimmel imagined Trump moving through life like someone meticulously revising a diary each night, turning every chaotic misstep into a heroic triumph, every scandal into sabotage, and every loss into the greatest victory humanity had ever witnessed. The events themselves weren't the target hit, was the desperation to control the narrative. Trump became the human equivalent of a film franchise that keeps churning out sequels nobody asked for, each claiming to be the biggest box office hit ever. Empty theaters didn't matter. The audience laughed quietly, knowingly, as if they'd witnessed the rewrites too many times to count. Oliver picked up that thread and expanded it to Trump's entire relationship with the world. He portrayed a man who sees every critic as a villain in his epic. every ally as a side character obligated to admire him, and every neutral observer as someone who simply hasn't realized they should be cheering. Trump's legacy became a fictional universe governed solely by loyalty, where disagreement is treated as betrayal. Oliver illustrated him navigating social interactions like a video game where approval points are the only currency, and the slightest loss of admiration triggers an immediate emergency reboot. Together, Kimmel and Oliver didn't just roast Trump, they mapped the mechanics of a mind forever at war with reality, showing the audience a man whose story exists only in the version he insists is true.
60 Minutes last night, he is desperate to try to blame this shutdown of his on the Democrats.
We are now approaching the longest shutdown in American history.
Democrats' fault.
He blurted that out like he's playing Name That Tune or something. Many were surprised to see Darth Renovator on 60 Minutes. You know, 1 year after suing 60 Minutes for editing an interview, Trump sits down with 60 Minutes.
Kimmel returned one final time. Bringing the energy of a closer determined to make the last punch resonate, he framed Trump's future not as redemption, nor as destruction, but as a looping cycle of self-celebration and denial, carousel powered entirely by ego. Every attempt at a comeback looked less like progress and more like a rerun everyone had already seen. Kimmel envisioned Trump striding forward with brash confidence, tripping over obstacles and insisting the ground itself had attacked him. He painted a vivid, emotional portrait of a man who will never stop declaring victory. Even when the scoreboard, the audience, the referees, and the stadium janitors have all moved on not in triumph, but in quiet, ironic disbelief. Trump's legacy became the story of someone eternally celebrating himself long after the world stopped watching. Oliver complimented this with surgical precision, highlighting that Trump doesn't merely crave praise, he insists on bending reality so that admiration becomes inevitable. It wasn't anger driving the satire, it was anthropology, a meticulous study of a man demanding reverence from a world stubbornly imperfect. The audience could sense the tragicomedy embedded in every gesture, every claim, every performance. Trump's narrative wasn't unraveling because people mocked him. It was collapsing because reality itself refused to audition for the role he had assigned. No matter how loudly he proclaimed his triumphs, the comedy became a mirror, reflecting a life lived in relentless self-congratulation, at odds with the world itself.